Very good morning to all of you. I am Dr. Krishna Vagela from the ARIP, Ashok and Rita Patel Institute of Physiotherapy, CHARUSAT University. I welcome you all on behalf of our ARIP family. So today we all are gathered here for a one informative session, which will be conducted by Dr. Prakash V on the topic of from paralysis to the perfection. So first of all, I would like to thank sir for that time, and I would like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Prakash V is an associate professor at ARIP, Charotar University, Changa. He has published 27 research articles in the Web of Science and the Scopus Index journal with more than 20,000 citations and H index of 15. He is a member of the Global Burden of Disease Collaborator Network and contributor to GBD studies. He had developed and validated the Indian Stroke Scale, a patient-reported functional stroke outcome measure application in Indian culture contents. And he was a recipient of Young Investigator Award from the World Stroke Association in 2016, Switzerland. And currently, he recognized as among world top 2% scientists in the year of 2021. So I would like to request sir to deliver a talk to our student. Sir, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Krishna, for the introduction. We will start the today's talk straight away. Right. So I hope everybody is able to see my screen. Good morning, everyone. You're all prospective students of physiotherapy. So I welcome you all for considering, or some of you may have already joined the profession of physiotherapy. So today, what I'm going to talk about is paralysis and the role of physiotherapy. Right. That would be my talk. I have structured the talk to suit the audience that you are, who are just starting off to know about physiotherapy. So I'll try to keep the technical terms to the bare minimum. If you find some terms that you didn't understand, feel free to let me know. Right. So what I will be discussing today is we will be discussing about what is it in the sense that what is paralysis, right? That would be the first part of my talk. I will explain what again, I'll try to be as simple and as direct as possible, followed by what causes paralysis, right? What are all the various disease, or what exactly happens in our brain that leads to paralysis. And the next part of my talk will deal with what are the underlying mechanisms of recovery, right? If a person gets a paralysis, how does one recover, right? What are all the physiological mechanisms that underlie recovery, followed by how physiotherapy helps in that recovery. So as a physiotherapist, how we can, what are all the, how we can help patients with paralysis to recover, and what kind of mechanisms in the brain that we as a physiotherapist, by delivering physiotherapy, we can influence those mechanisms towards the benefit of patients' recovery. So this would be the overall structure of my talk. I will go by it one by one. And if you're having any questions or anything, you can type in the chat box, which I will respond at the end of my presentation. In between, if you find my my audio goes off, or you're not able to get what I'm saying, please type in the chat box. We'll respond to it quickly. Right. So the first part is about what is paralysis, right? Generally, we find, I'm sure many of us have found people who are in wheelchair, right? Most of them have had some form of paralysis. And there are other patients, people who had paralysis, but may not end up in a wheelchair, but they have problem in moving their limbs, walking, standing, or for some people, even getting up from the bed is it's a sort of a difficult task. So we'll try to understand what paralysis is, right? So in a anatomical term, it's basically loss of motor function. Now, what we refer to motor here is ability to move. As you know, we are able to move from one place to another place as a result of muscles producing forces that are required to move our body against gravity. So paralysis is basically muscles are unable to produce force which is required for a particular movement. So it's basically muscles functions are affected, right? So that's why people end up in wheelchair. They're not able to move or not able to walk, get up from the bed. Many such problem because so basically in simple way, it's problem with the movement and which is caused by muscles inability or reduced ability to produce force. So in general, the paralysis can affect a person in multiple ways. The simplest form of paralysis is a single muscle can be affected. One particular muscle, say for example, or biceps or triceps, these muscles can be individually affected. And paralysis can also affect a group of muscles. It may be, your thigh muscles or your calf muscles. It can be entirely affected where multiple muscles together. Or in some cases, a paralysis can affect the entire side of the body, one whole side of the body, right? Which is often we refer to as hemiplegia, right? One side of the body is affected. And in some unfortunate situation, the entire body can be affected, right? Meaning the muscles from the entire body that might be involved. Say if you have a spinal cord injury, an injury at your neck, spine, right? This can cause. So therefore, the paralysis can be very detrimental to one's life. And the more severe form of paralysis is where multiple groups of muscle, the entire side of the body or the entire body, your legs, your arms, and everything is affected, right? So that's why this can be one of the serious problems. As physiotherapists, we play a major role in helping patients recover having this paralysis. So this is a visual explanation of what I have said. These are all technical terms, but fairly simple terms. So I thought you could get to know. So the first one is the monoplegia. As you can see, mono refers to one, only one limb is affected, right? The second is known as hemiplegia. As I've said, the one half of the side, one half of the body is affected, left side affected or right side affected. In some cases, it might also affect the one side of the face, muscles in the face that helps us to laugh, to emote other emotions and talk and eat. These also can be affected. There are in some cases, peculiarly, there is something called a diplegia, where both forelimbs are affected, but relatively upper limbs are more affected than lower limbs, right? And there's another term called paraplegia, a very common after spinal cord injury. And these are all the patients who often end up in wheelchair, right? And the quadriplegia is where all four limbs are affected. This is the severest form, which I mentioned in the previous slide. The entire body is affected. This is one of the most severe form of paralysis. The word plegia is usually refers to paralysis, right? So depending upon the number of limbs or the side affected, these are all the common terms that are used to refer to paralysis. I'm sure some of you might have already heard about these terms in the school or just in a general context. Right. So in order to understand what causes paralysis, we needed to have some fundamental understanding of nervous system. So I'm going to quickly run through very basic aspects of nervous system, because I think that's really important for you to gather what actually leads to paralysis. And also it's important for you to understand recovery of paralysis, right? I'm sure many of these information maybe you've learned in your biology class. So basically, the paralysis is due to the injury or disease to the nervous system. So we need to understand nervous system. So broadly, a nervous system consists of two structures. One is brain, another is spinal cord. And all the nerves that comes out in here, as you can see, they all comes out of the spinal cord, right? Which supplies the entire body, right? So these two structures constitute our nervous system, right? And one important thing that you should know that all these structures, whether brain, spinal cord, the other nerves that comes out of the spinal cord that supplies our entire uh, body, right? All these structures are very much interconnected. They are a network, right? Why this is important to understand is because any problem inside a network can affect multiple parts because they are all connected. So if there is a sort of interruption in one part of the network, say, for example, over here, all the information that comes from brain or comes out of spinal cord will be affected, right? So that's why you have to understand that they are a very much interconnected structure. For our convenience sake, we are studying it as different parts, brain, spinal cord, and so on. They all are made of basically neurons. So as I was saying, you can see from top to bottom of the body, from your head to the toes, all parts are connected and all parts are controlled by brain. It involves our muscles, our internal organs, in terms, say, for our heart, our lungs, our intestine, stomach, and kidney, all the organs, and many other glands that secretes hormones and all other structures. All are supplied by nervous system, and therefore problems in the nervous system will have a very far-fetched impact on various functions of the body. However, for today's topic, we will be specifically studying the nervous system's dysfunctions related to muscles, which is what is referred to paralysis, right? So this is how nervous system is broadly classified, right? I think you might know this already. I hope they taught in biology, right? So what is important in here is that the nervous system is broadly classified into central nervous system, basically what is in our head and our back, which involves brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system. Even though, like I said, we classify this for our understanding, but they are all one together. For example, the peripheral nervous system is basically a part of brain and spinal cord. They are all connected together. And with the peripheral nervous system, further right. So yeah, let me continue from where I left off. We were talking about how nervous system is, structured or organized. So I was saying that because it controls almost everything, every part of our body, right? Now, for this presentation, we are going to discuss more about its role in controlling skeletal muscle, right? But this is just to give an overall outlook on what goes. So moving on, this is the neuron, one of the basic structure in nervous system. Basically, the entire nervous system, spinal cord, brain, and other nerves, they are all basically made of this particular structure, right? Neurons, right? So it has a head, this has a tail, and it has a body in a simple way, right? The body is covered by something called as myelin sheath. And the body is known as axon. The head is known as cell body. and the tail is the nerve ending or the axon bulb. And the head also has some small branches known as dendrites. Okay, so this is the basic structure of all nerve cells. While we see neuron as a single cell, but this picture I'm showing in terms of how the brain actually looks like. Like the pictures that we often see commonly, or they're all like a big structure brain, but inside how it looks like, they're all well connected. Remember, as I was saying, that the entire nervous system throughout the body, they are all very much well networked, they're connected, right? So this is, if you go a little bit much in deeper, it doesn't have a typical brain structure. Inside, if you see, this is how it looks like, right? So all the information that goes in is being transferred to different parts of the brain, and and everything that goes in and out, all are being sent to this different parts of the neuron all the time. That keeps us conscious, and it serves many functions: our attention, memory, and ability to speak, ability to decide, ability to hear, everything. It's all part of information that is going through this network of. Now, as I was saying, this particular talk is more about brain and its connection to the muscles. So we leave out other functions such as cognitive functions, other mental health function, decision making, all other functions. We'll keep it aside and we'll focus on what it does. So this is the simplest animation that shows what happens from that is a information. In this case, we'll say it's an impulse or a action potential is being transmitted from neuron to the muscle via these. You can see this is one of the motor neurons. So from brain through spinal cord, it comes here, and then when it's reached over here, it causes the contraction, that is shortening of that muscle, which in turn is allow us to move, right? So this is the basic structure. So the paralysis, as if you remember, we have defined paralysis as inability of the muscle to function, in this case, contract. So any paralysis caused or the inability is caused could be due to problem in this entire pathway from the brain, spinal cord, and then nerves, or in some cases, even the muscle. So there might be a problem in any of these structures, which will eventually lead to paralysis. That's for a simplest understanding what I'm saying. Right. So enough with the physiology. We move on to the causes. Right. So as I have just said, the pathway from brain to spinal cord, from brain to spinal cord to the muscle, if there is any problem in this entire pathway, it will lead to muscles having trouble in producing the force or trying to contract. So what causes? There are fundamentally two reasons. There is either a disease, there is some internal process. The disease can be many diseases. I don't want to go into the details of it. A disease might be caused by a block in an artery, a disease might be caused by congenital, that is from birth, or a disease might be due to some genetic reasons, or a tumor. It can be any disease, right? So basically a process starts from internal, inside, or the cause can be an injury that's external. It can be a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury. Somebody had a accident where they get hit with their head, so that can lead to, or somebody fallen down, or this kind of external injury also causes paralysis. So broadly, it can be a disease or an injury, and this leads to the process. Now, what I'm going to show you next is how from the injury to the actual damage to the nervous system, that specific neuron, which I just told you, how that happens. So I found a pretty good, a short video that shows from traumatic brain injury, how it happens and how it leads to the specific involvement of the nerve cells, right? Let me show that. Please let me know if the video plays, right? The video doesn't play, let me know. So in this video, it shows how from a brain injury to that involvement of neuron takes place, right? As you can see, it's an injury. So you see there are neurons, different types of neurons. Here you can see this is a very cross section of the brain tissue, the white matter and the gray matter. So when it falls, it shakes the head like this. So when it is being shaked, right? Basically, this body, which I've said, no, head and body, right? When it gets hit like this, these are all very elastic structures, our neuron. So they get pulled away like this. When it is being pulled away, it causes damage, internal damage in the neurons. And these internal damage in turn will affect the nervous system's ability to send information. So this information will no longer pass to the another. As I've said already, all neurons are interconnected. So problems in one neuron will also get problems into another neuron. So this is how the damage is caused by an external injury. Can you understand, right? So just I'm going to replay this video because it's a little bit faster. And with my explanations, now without my explanation, you can watch again and try to gather what we have learned so far and how a injury causes damage to the neurons, that is basically cells of the nervous system. This is what happens when somebody gets a head injury, when your head hit on the any hard surface. Right. So moving on, these are some other examples for disease. I've given an example of how a damage, a trauma, an injury causes damage to the nervous system. Here, this is one of the example of a disease. This common, not so common in India, but it's multiple sclerosis, a disease. So basically, the first slide in here, it shows, you can see brain and spinal. This is the neuron which I've talked about. These coverings, you can see that envelope sort of, these are all the coverings of the nervous system, which are, these covers are produced by these cells called oligodendrocytes. Now, these covers are really very important for nervous system. It is critical for sending the impulses. The lesser the covering, and the impulse will go slowly. And if it's very much damaged, the impulse will not pass at all. So what it's going to show next is how in multiple sclerosis, a disease is affecting the nervous system. You can see here, this cell which was producing that covering is being attacked. You can see this is the attack from bodies, our own cells. When it attacks, you can see this particular functions or effect. If you watch it here, this protective sheath is gone, which in turn causes paralysis, because the impulse that is sent from the brain either doesn't reach in our muscle, or it reaches very slowly, which in turn cause difficulty in producing a force. So these are all the two examples I have shown so far in terms of how a disease or injury affects the nervous system. The last example is about something common, you might know, seizures, right? Where you can see in seizures, what basically happens is the first one shows neuronal activity, which is normal. So in seizures, basically what happens is there is excessively faster this happens. which in turn causes the movements like this, right? So these are all possible abnormalities that takes place in nervous system, which in turn causes paralysis. The seizure doesn't, in some rare cases, it also causes paralysis, right? So we have completed the second part of our talk, of my talk, in terms of what causes the paralysis. So a quick summary of what we have covered so far. In the first part of my talk, I've discussed about what a paralysis means, in terms of the reduced ability to muscles to produce force, and what are the different types of paralysis exist, what are the different names that are used. Followed by, we had a quick review of nervous system, specifically neurons and how it is organized, like brain and spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, central nervous system, and so on. We have also looked into the structure, neuronal structure. Later, on the third part of the presentation, which I just completed, we have looked into what leads to paralysis. We have seen how the structure of neuron are affected or damaged by an external injury. We've also seen one example of by a disease, how it affects, right? So basically the structure is damaged, which in turn either totally blocks the information from brain reaching to muscle, or it reduces the information. It modifies in such a way so that the muscle is no longer able to produce force to the extent that is required for people to move on their own. Right. So the next part is, okay, if this damage occurs, we have seen this damage. Now we have seen the neurons are being torn, and the myelin sheath is being damaged. We have seen that. So what happens after this damage? That is how our nervous system recover following injury or disease. Now, this is really important for us to understand, because this is where physiotherapy comes into play. That is how the next part we will see, the last, which is last, would be seeing after we looked at various mechanisms of recovery. We will discuss how physiotherapy can influence this mechanism in a positive way to promote recovery, right? So that's why it's important for us to understand what are the mechanisms following injury or disease. So let me just say, there's a damage here. I've given a damage of a car. Hopefully it's not ours, but let's just take somebody else's car. It's being damaged very badly, right? So what happens next when there is a damage? If we look at structures such as physical structures, man-made structures, right? When it is being damaged, there are two things it's possible, depending upon the extent of damage. If it's a minor damage, then we'll repair it, replace with another part, right? Or if it's a major damage, we need to throw it away, right? This is what we do. Now, when it comes to brain, throwing it away or replacing is out of question, right? At least as of now, we have not developed a science to, throw something away, throw over one of the body part and replace it with new. Maybe with some joints we are able to do, but with brain, no, we have not reached to that level. So currently it's out of question. So what else is possible is the repair, right? So the repair is the mechanisms by which these damage are being addressed. Fortunately for us, that for repair, we don't necessarily have to go outside. Now, even though we go to doctors, but the role of the doctor cannot be equated to a mechanic here, because it's different, right? Let me not go much in detail to it. So why I'm saying is because the biological tissues, the biological structures, unlike these physical structures, has its own ability to repair itself. That is, if a body is damaged, say, for example, if your skin is damaged, there is some scratch and so on, you will see that it automatically heals within few days. That's an example of our human tissue has its own ability to repair. right? So that's the process that we need to see. But the ability to repair has its limits. It also depends upon the extent of damage, right? And the capacity. But that's the process. So that process is often now popularly known as plasticity. It is basically a brain's ability to change itself, either after damage or even without a damage. We are learning something new. New skills that we are learning means the brain nervous system able to change. So that is known as plasticity. That is ability of nervous system to change itself as a result of damage or as a result of practice. You practice something, you change, right? So it's important. We understand basics of this mechanism, because this is how physiotherapy plays a role in helping the brain to change itself to produce positive outcomes. So basically, this plasticity, it's broadly divided into two: one, structural plasticity, and two, functional plasticity. Structural plasticity is brain where the structure itself changes. That is, this neuron and its connections and everything changes. Functional plasticity is where after damage, that structure is no longer be replaceable because the damage is so severe. So what happens is other parts of the brain now try to take over the function and or give some connections to that function. So that causes to some extent a recovery of lost functions. That is called functional recovery. I hope these two things are clear, right? Structural plastic reverse to brain structures, damaged structure repair itself or getting better. Functional plasticity related to brain functions or taken care by other related parts of the nervous system, because it's changing the structure is no longer feasible. So this is in terms of at the cell level, this is what happens. So it is given in a simple words without getting into much basics. So in structure, basically, as you can see, it makes more and more new neurons connections. But in functional, you can see the damage pre-existing neurons. The structure actually no longer is feasible to live. So it dies, and the new neurons that is from the closer areas or neurons which are not used before are taking over the functions. These are some other examples of it. And I just want you to see, you can see that this is the area of the brain that is dead. So what happens is from the other side of the brain, you can see here, this is what, this gives a branch from here to the damaged part. From others, it can come from the other side of or other half of the brain or from the nearby parts of the brain. This is basically the mechanism underlying recovery of nervous system. Right. So we have come to the last section of my talk, where I try to put all these things together in terms of how, as a physiotherapist, help in recovery of the patients' recovery. People who are not able to walk or having difficulty in walk or other functions, how we can help, right? What is the mechanism? So this is the fundamental explanations of how physiotherapy can help, right? So basically this neural repair is what we have discussed. No? There's a repair process there. Now our system is trying to help, trying to repair itself. It's called restitution. And behavioral compensation is where a person, because of lost function, they try to compensate. Say, for example, people who are not able to use their right hand, try to use their left hand to compensate. Or people who are having problem in one side of the body, they'll try to compensate with other side of the body, right? That is behavioral compensation. Not just as a side, this compensation can be within your one side itself. Say, for example, if your hand is affected, maybe to some extent we'll use our elbow and shoulder to compensate for, right? So as physiotherapy, we focus on both these mechanisms. Our treatment can help in facilitating this process. The process is already on, so we can help facilitating this process. And also we can help this process to be more optimal, more towards the right way. And also one other thing is this neural repair, it can go wrong if sufficient training is not given, because it tries to help, but at the same time, if there is no professional practice, help with a professional practice, this repair may go wrong, or it may not achieve fullest of its potential, right? So on all these three aspects, physiotherapy can play a role. Let me repeat that again. First, the physiotherapy can help in improving, facilitating this repair process. Second, physiotherapy can ensure that the fullest potential of the process is utilized. And thirdly, physiotherapy can help in the substitution, that's compensation part, where we can make compensation better in terms of for the patient. So in three levels, physiotherapy can significantly contribute in the management of the paralysis and as a result of a performance in daily activities. So in order to do that, these are all the various principles that we in physiotherapy we use, in terms of basically the more you use it, the better you have it, and what kind of exercise we have to give, how much we have to give, how long we need to give, all are part and parcel of physiotherapy. And the physiotherapist will decide how we can choose this exercise, what exercise we have to choose, how long they should perform, how we can make the exercise more difficult, how we can facilitate this process. All of it is what fundamentally the role of physiotherapist in helping patients with paralysis. This is again, this might be too physiological, too technical, but basically the mechanisms by which what happens inside neurons as a result of exercise. Basically, you have changes at the multiple level, the neural organization, reorganization, the synapse level changes at multiple level change. These are all basically changes that takes place when we learn anything. Say, for example, if you have previously did not learn swimming or cycling, and after that you have learned that. So basically, these are all the same mechanism that happens in the brain. So as a physiotherapy, when we are giving exercise, that specific form of exercise, we try to facilitate this same process. Can you understand? Yeah, we have come to the end of my talk. I hope it was clear. I'll try to keep the technicalities to the minimum. Right. So I would be happy to know if you have some questions or any feedback you would like to share.
Now, student, this session will be open for question answering. You can ask your query directly to the sir, or else you can write in the chat box. Or you can give your suggestion, feedback in the chat box or directly to the sir. Over to you, students.
If you find it too boring, you can also say that. I don't mind. I'm a very democratic man. Feel free to share whatever you feel like.
Okay, so I guess no queries are there from the student side. So we are ending this session, sir. I would like, okay, that is amazing session, sir. We enjoyed this session a lot.
Right. Thank you, Vishwa, Priyanshi, Nandini, and Udit.
Okay. So thank you once again, sir, for sharing your precious knowledge about the nervous system, paralysis, and the role of physiotherapist in the recovery process. So I would like to thank you. And I would like to thank all the students who attending this particular session or who attend this particular wonderful session. So I would like to thank all the students for the same. Now I am ending this meeting, sir.
Yeah, thank you again. Got a lot of people have given some good feedback.
There
Thank
are some
you.
good feedback.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, students. Thank you, sir.
Hope to see you all when you join.